everyone to the International Mentoring Community, All Things Mentoring Lounge, a place for conversations, answering questions about all things mentoring. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I'm one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community, and joining me is Doug Lawrence. And we'll introduce a little bit more about ourselves as we get into the conversations. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of where we're going. Today is mentoring at work, the value of experience, or the value of experience mentoring at work. Just depends how which way you want to look at it. And we're just going to unpack the words like work and value and experience and mentoring, and sort of see where that takes us. And we've actually got 5 considerations for you around this value of the experience that you can associate with mentoring. And Doug and I thought that these would be great topics to sort of have a conversation, as we affectionately say, unpack them for you, with you. And with you would mean is, jump into the chat function. If you want to ask us questions, we'll monitor accordingly and see what happens. But before we get into it, Doug, you want to just share who are you and what do you do?
I certainly can. So I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm a co-founder of the International Mentoring Community. And I have my own company, Talent C, which is focused on mentoring as well. I am with the International Mentoring Community. I am the Director of Practice and Outreach.
Great. And Dr. Stephen Hobbs here, co-founder, and I am the Director of Education and Verification. So if you're going through to do your certification in mentoring to become a mentor, competent mentor, I'm the one who takes care of crossing the T's and dotting the I's around the certification component. I have my own company as well, Wealth Movement, WELLTH. I do a lot of work in the mentoring area, but more with nature-informed enthusiasts like entrepreneurs and employees and elders who use nature as the base of their educating approach. So with that introduction, I think it would be of great value, Doug, because we attempt to use this more conversational style to what we're doing. I said to Doug, I'm going to ask him this question. What's the greatest value that you've taken from your time, your experience as a mentor? And I'm going to share mine as well. But Doug, you got something you want to share with us right now?
Well, from a value perspective, I can think of a number of different situations where what I've given to the mentoring relationship from a value perspective, I've gotten back from my mentee, probably tenfold. And part of the idea behind that is that it has given me the opportunity to grow as on a personal basis. So how I perceive that is it's helped me get a better understanding of who I am and what's important to me from a mentoring perspective, what's important to me and how do I apply that in my day-to-day living.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get into mentoring, you start to really appreciate that relationship you have with your mentee, and it becomes two-way. And we'll talk a little bit more about the definition that we use with mentoring. I thought what I would add would be, knowing I was going to ask you this, I've had a day to think about it a little bit more, but I think the greatest thing for me is coming to understand more about who I am and the characteristics of me as a person that I bring when I'm mentoring. And words like courage and commitment and calmness and humility, these aspects of living my extraordinary life, and I weave them into my mentoring approach. And I so enjoy that because I may not have known about them as much when I was younger. You sort of walking through with your chest sort of puffed up a little bit, going, yeah, I can take care of, I can do everything I need to do. And then you start mentoring and you go, oh, hang on a minute. That mentee, to Doug's point, is sharing some things that I maybe have not really looked at myself. And so I can certainly echo what Doug has shared with us and bring this notion of self-awareness, self-concept that just gets heightened because of the mentoring. And I so appreciate that. And that's why it's one of the main areas in our certification program that we ask you to think about is that self-reflection, the well-being of yourself. Who is it that you bring, unmasking yourself, being natural in mentoring, and asking the same of the mentee. And that, again, to Doug's point. I think what we'll do then is we'll jump into looking at some of the words in this title, because I think that would be of value, and then get to the 5 considerations we want to share with you on this broadcast. Again, if you want to jump into the chat, please do. If you have questions for us, we can certainly take it from there. I think what we'll do is we'll look at the word work. Because we sometimes look at that and then just zip by, just go, yeah, okay, work, just some aspect of our life. But there's some interesting ways of looking at work. And the first one I'm going to share with you has a poetic leaning. It actually comes from David Whyte, who's a poet, very well recognized poet in the United States. I've actually attended one of his over 3 Saturdays reading of his poetry, where he weaves in some of his own stories with the poetry. Very interesting, and he's certainly got some lived experience that he brings forward. And I believe he's got some great recommendations in the like a poet laureate kind of status in the United States. And he wrote one of his books is called Crossing the Unknown Sea. And in it, he defines work. And paraphrasing, bringing that forward, he shares the notion of work is about discovering and shaping the place where the self meets the world. And I've always appreciated that one because while broad, it's also very particular to you, because it's about discovering and shaping the place where yourself meets the world. And meeting the world, or being for the world, it speaks a lot about the work. And here the other definitions of work come in. Work being the sort of the collective sense of the projects that you're involved in, the work that you do, and like the work of mentoring, how that is in service for the community with those that you're interacting with. So this notion of discovering and shaping this place, let's call it mentoring, this place of mentoring, where there's the relationships and the connections that you are bringing to the mentee. Those are all very important about shaping. And I think both of our introductions that Doug and I shared here is about shaping ourself, right? Being for the world, being with this sense of mentoring that we're offering. But there's another aspect of work here that sort of weaves into this, and it's the sense of energy, the time and place that you direct something to happen. So there is this energy, whether paid or unpaid, the joules of work, joules being a unit that expresses this notion of energy connected to work. And it's from this mental, physical aspect. And again, one can dive into that much more from a physics point of view. That's not where we're coming from in our broadcast, but I just wanted to make mention is this energy of work that you put in. And sometimes people, when they're mentoring, dabble in it. I think that Doug and I would certainly encourage you to get in, and if you're going to be in there, when you mentor. Don't dabble in mentoring. It's important that you are fully present. You have the gratitude that goes with it. You're inspired, enthused, and you have the certainty to be able to do that. So this notion of work that we associate with mentoring, and like I always do, sometimes Doug has something he wants to share because of what I shared. So anything here at the moment, Doug?
Well, the one or two things that sort of popped up is, as you were giving the description of work, And what popped into my mind was more so from the geographical, the physical aspect of it, and work from the aspect of work in the community and work in your personal life, in your family life, working at creating those relationships that you need to create. And then, of course, there's always the concept of work from a corporate perspective. Work, and that can be broken down into much the same sort of thing as working at relationships, but also at the physical task of projects and so on and so forth, with, with it being from a corporate perspective.
Yeah, so what you're doing is you're sort of emphasizing the notion of discovering and shaping the place where the self meets the world. Yeah, so good points, good points. Well, I think what would be great is to take a look at this definition of mentoring. IMC, the International Mentoring Community, works with a definition. Doug, you want to share that with us so we can just unpack it a little bit?
We sure can. So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and develop on a personal and professional basis.
You want to just unpack some of the meaning of some of those phrases in there?
Yeah, we can. We can, there's the trusted relationship, which is the cornerstone, the foundation piece of that whole definition. There's also the aspect of learn and develop. So mentoring is a continuous learning process that you go through, as certainly as a mentor, but I'm going to suggest as a mentee as well, that you certainly go through that part of it. The other aspect is the personal and professional growth aspect. And which would you tackle first, or do you? And it's being mindful, being aware of the fact that one may influence the other.
And we've hinted at that two-way in terms of when Doug and I shared what did we get from mentoring? What's the value that we derive from it? It's two-way, it goes both ways. And while the mentor might start it off with a little bit more formality, it will go into much more informal connection and arrangement, just simply because of what is this notion of the nature of mentoring. So if we connect that mentoring with work, so mentoring, the ing, the process, you could consider it work. I hinted at that when I was looking at the definition of work. So, and many different places in which it can take place, right? It can in your own family, in your workplace, with youth. Doug knows it from the mental health issues that are happening in communities. So there's lots of places that this work of mentoring can be applied. Well, let's take a look at the term experience, and this is one that I'm very fond of because I speak about the notion of extraordinary experiences and how can you develop and deliver extraordinary experiences through an educator's lens. And being a mentor, how do you develop and deliver extraordinary experiences? And the experiences here, talking about the encounter, what you're facing, confronting, running into. There's lots of those. We speak about the mentee. You're entering in and encountering the mentee. But in your own life, there's lots of different things that you're encountering. And one of the great things that I have come to truly understand is that often the obstacle is the way. The experience of the obstacle, what it is that you're facing, is the way. It's the occurrence, the process of living. And I've come to really enjoy that aspect of my life because I've been up and down, in and out in a lot of things in my life. Everything, from having a gun stuck up my nose to facing some of my own issues in living. And I know Doug has his own stories that he can share as well. And if you're listening to our other broadcasts, we speak about them and bring them forward. But there's something else about this notion of experience. And it's sort of this is a fun way, I think, of looking at it. There is what we would call an experience, an in front of the word experience. And what it does is it sort of reminds us about the concept or the noun use of that word. And often we talk about setting up an experience, right? So setting up an experience with the mentee, what the mentor has to do to prepare, what's the mentee have to do to prepare. Then there's to experience, the TO of experience. And what we're talking about there is the practice of experience, and that's the verb form. And this is the one that I have spent a lot of time getting into and truly understanding. It's the experience, THE experience. And that's the notion of the lived experience. What is it that you come to know and do and share, right? The attitudes that go with that, this notion of what is that something, the something that you give thingness. What is it that you are bringing out of an experience to get the experience? So, yeah, I'm playing around a little bit with nouns and verbs and outcomes and all that. But when I dove into this aspect of experience and then the creation of extraordinary experiences, and Doug speaks a lot about the notion of good, great, extraordinary mentors. The extraordinary mentor is delivering extraordinary experiences. And I just thought that I would share it with you. And if you need to, just go back and just rewind a minute or so back there and just listen to it again, because what it does is it helps you to approach the sense of the value of experience. All right, and we'll go into value here in a second. But Doug, anything to go over in terms of experience?
The main thing, and you've touched on all of the points. The only thing that I reinforce would be the lived experience, the something as you've described it, is that's extremely important as you become more and more involved in the mentoring process and you start to develop a practice and you look at certification. It's being able to understand that I do have all this lived experience, that if I know how to ask the right questions, I can almost drop my mentee into that particular experience. And you'll actually have times where they will come to you and say, oh my goodness, I saw myself in that story that you just told.
Right. So let's take a look at the word value, because it has a little bit of a philosophical leaning to it. And Kurt Lewin, someone who I followed and read about, who spoke a lot about in the 1940s, spoke about this, is that there's nothing more practical than a good theory. And a theory is a generalized way of looking at something so that you can share that insights, those interpretations with others. That's what a theory is meant to be. And there's nothing more practical than that, because what it means is that you're actually reporting on your results and your research. And that's a great thing to be doing. And I think in such an indirect way, mentoring, as a mentor, you're sharing your lived experience, you're sharing what it is that would be considered your results and your research with the mentee, matching it up against their living experience as they interact with you to build up their results and their research. And that's where it gets this two-way sharing that starts to take place. So another way to look at this notion of value, it's certainly about what regard you give to something that you're holding or you have with you. Remember, the notion of experience is to give something thingness, it has value to you, and therefore what regard do you give to that? And there's three ways of looking at this. And the first one is this something, this value that I attribute to this something, is it worth something to me? And often the worth is from an evaluation. I'm going to evaluate it. Is this a worth to me? Because what I might do is I might attempt to improve it for myself. And the idea is that from a mentee point of view was that idea that the mentor gave to me, was that worth it to me to hear that story? And if it is, then through my evaluation to improve it, what is it that I could draw out of it that I could use? And or the mentor helps the mentee take a look at a situation and do the same thing. What's the worth of that experience that you've gone through, right? To have experienced it, what is it that you can draw from it? So there's the value of worth. Then there's the value of truth. And this is where the notion is that you do experiments. Hey, guess what? You got to get into doing things. And even the mentee in doing things, you might learn something from the mentor, or together you might go, well, there's something here that you might be able to do, but you are the only one who can do it, dear mentee. So give it a go and prove that there's some truth in that. So the value of truth, right, has this notion of, can I prove through my experiment that this has application for me? Then there's the value of usefulness. And this notion of usefulness is the idea of the development. I'm going to develop something here, right? I'm pulling some elements together from the experiences, and then I'm going to develop something. So maybe as a mentee, I'm going to develop a checklist, or I'm going to develop 3 steps I'm going to use. I'm going to develop a model, a template, or something like that, so that I can use it. So the value of usefulness, the use, utility. And when we look at this from a mentoring and a work perspective, we are looking at this notion of the value of mentoring and at work, the experience that you're going through, that the mentor and mentee are having conversations about. They're actually looking through the lens of worth, truth, and utility, usefulness. And I just wanted to bring that forward with you, because it has been a great help for me, is because I just go, okay, so is this worth it to me? Is this of value? Is this right? Is this truth? Is this of value? Is this of utility to me? Is this of value? And what I've got is a bit of a filter that I can take a look at as I consider the conversations that we're having. Any thoughts there, Doug?
The one thing that just kind of jumped out for me was when you talked about the aspect of the value and the lived experience. Was, for me, it's all about relatability. So if I'm working with somebody and I'm trying to use or leverage my lived experience, I need to make sure that however I position it or posture it, that it is in fact relatable, so that as much as possible they can see themselves in that story.
For sure, for sure. Great word, relatability. The ability to relate.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at 5 considerations or 5 value lenses of experience while mentoring at work. Now, these are not in any particular order, all right? These are aspects of mentoring that we wanted to bring to your attention. The first one I know is near and dear to Doug's heart, which is the notion of record the experience. Because what happens is the records that you're keeping is an interpretation that you have of the experience. It may not be the words about the identical experience, but there are interpretations, the insights that you're deriving from that experience, and to be able to record them, all right? Because in many ways, this recording of what has happened for you that you look back over later through logbooks or your portfolio, if you want to use a portfolio documentation system, overcomes the notion of forgetfulness. Because sometimes if you're recording it, a couple of weeks later, or even a day later, sometimes you forget it. And that's why it's important to record your experiences and get it down in words that make sense for you at this point in time, so you can draw that thingness. What is it that's of value out for yourself? But also when you go to have conversations with your mentee again later, you might go back into that logbook and go, oh, right, hang on. I need to talk a little bit more about this the next time we get together. But it's because, oh, I need to do that, and that's great. I know you always talk about logbooks and documentation. Doug, thoughts there?
Well, just the big thing, and a good example was I spent some time with somebody last night, helping them through a couple things that they were dealing with, and it was probably maybe half an hour's worth of my time and stuff like that. I normally try to write that in my log immediately afterwards, and I didn't, and it almost kind of went right by me, and I didn't. And the other part that our listeners can think about too is come up with an idea or a scheme or a process that is going to help you remind yourself based on what I call trigger words. I use trigger words in my logbook to help me think back about what took place yesterday if I was working with somebody, and the trigger words will tell me they'll lead me to what the situation was that we were working on.
Yeah, and I think there may be a leaning here towards the word mentor. Those of you who are listening might be hey, mentees, we encourage you to keep logbooks as well, because you're going through those experiences, and that can help you out as well. This whole documentation approach, mentees, it's a good idea to do it yourself. There's some information we have in the International Mentoring Community Library, and other videos that you can certainly watch on our YouTube channel that highlight this piece. But the next value of it links to this notion of the documentation, and it's the process that you go through, this reflection in and reflection on. And the idea of reflection in, reflection on this way is when you're in it and reflecting, and then if you step back and look at it, there's a reflection on. And then you could go to reflection because, which is sometime afterwards and Doug is making the point, not too long afterwards, right, is what's the reflection because of that mentoring. And it's to be able to sort out from an experience point of view. Remember I shared that Doug talks about good, great, extraordinary. When it comes to experience, we can add a couple more words in there. There's good, great. There's notion of memorable and remarkable. Memorable in terms of, yeah, I have a memory of that. I deepen up my memory. Remarkable is sort of, oh, okay, I'm going to put a little marker down on that one. Now it's an important one to keep going. And Doug's talked about those schemes that you're looking at, templates, tools that you might create. That's how I sometimes look at remarkable, and into the notion of extraordinary. And that becomes really important because what you're doing here is three words: meaningful pattern recognition. What meaning do you give to the pattern that you're recognizing? But sometimes you recognize, hang on a minute, I'm seeing this pattern. What meaning might I give to it? Or you might go, hang on a minute, there's a pattern here. Oh, I can recognize it actually unfolding this way. What's the meaning I give to it? So keep those three words close to your heart, head, and hands, because they're a way to go, oh, what's the meaningful pattern recognition that I'm picking up as I'm reflecting in on, because that I can then put into my logbook, into my journal. Also, don't give up on the reflection that might take place even a month later. Record that, because sometimes I know that I might be walking and I might be thinking about something that I've done or I've thought about because of a mentoring connection. Go, oh, hang on a minute. And then a couple of steps later, I add a little bit more to it. And a couple more steps later, I do a little bit more, because walking for me is another way to bring ideas forward. And I'll come back and go, oh, okay, I'll record those. And like Doug, I have a little scheme. What I do is I remember some of those ideas and I write them down as like article or book titles. That's my way of doing it, so that I go, all right, I wrote that title down. What would I put underneath that? And that brings back, it sort of sparks ideas for me. Reflection in, on, because. Doug, thoughts you want to add here?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Okay. So then if we take a look at that definition of mentoring, and based on that overview that's there, there's some other aspects of that definition. We sort of hinted at them a little bit that speak to the value of experience in mentoring. And it's to bring some of this ideas of that professionalism to the foreground. I think we can understand the personal aspect of this, the value that's there. But from a professionalism point of view, the notion of how do you improve your professional approach to develop your inspired standards and wise practices? What can you do because of the value of your mentoring and the experience that you're deriving, what the mentee is sharing with you? Advances, all right, sometimes can even amplify your professional approach. And you want to be able to stay with that because it's unfolding as you're using it, and then as you infold, in other words, you reflect on it, enfold on it so that you can unfold it, infold it. It's a continuous process. And to stay present with that is really important, because that's where your skills and knowledge and attitude when mentoring really comes from. But there's three groups of 3 words. There we go. 3 groups of 3 words that I'd like to just share with you, because they have in my life become very important. When Doug and I get together, I often bring one of the 3 of them up in our conversation, go, are we talking about this? And then that helps us to spur things on. So I'm going to go through each one, and Doug, if you want to jump in and say anything, just jump in. A little bit of silence, I'll just go on to the next one. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay. So the first one is patience, flexibility, and discretion. And this is the one that I learned. Remember earlier I shared about the guns up my nose? Patience, flexibility, and discretion was a time where I had to learn how to deal with situations. And that's where I had my 3-minute mentor. That was one of the examples. But in that, the flexibility to sort of bend with what is taking place, I think we can understand the patience, we can understand the discretion. Sometimes it's better to just be quiet. Silence can be golden, right? I learned that. But it's the flexibility, because sometimes situations like that can spark a reaction versus a response. So I always remind myself, patience, flexibility, and discretion. The next one I go on to is gratitude and presence, all right, followed by inspiration, enthusiasm, and certainty. The idea here is wherever I find myself, there's gratitude to find myself there as I stay found in what it is that I'm doing. And therefore, that presence that's for me is that I'm being natural. This is me. When I'm mentoring, right? When you mentor. And I'm going to have presence in that, which then brings this whole notion of inspiration, enthusiasm, and certainty that benefits me, and it truly benefits the mentee, because they get to see and feel and experience who I am by bringing this notion of my presence into that connection, into that arrangement. So the notion of the gratitude presence with the inspiration, enthusiasm, and certainty. So that's another 3.
And I think that can go for the mentee as well.
Yes. And I would certainly encourage patience, flexibility, and discretion with the mentee, because sometimes you might be in the mentoring relationship connection, and something that may have happened to you unknowing to the mentor, maybe some phrasing, to use Doug's, triggered something, and rather than react, find the way to respond. So important. Thank you for that. Next one would be the notion of action, reaction, and proaction. And where I'm getting here is we're constantly in action, right? We're moving forward. But there is this notion of, and I've been saying it sometimes, reaction is sort of the notion of what you quickly do in reacting to what is being said, versus proaction, which is taking a little bit of a breather, 3 breaths, if you wish, all right, and proacting into it. We might lean other words like prevention and preparation, and the continuance of practice is knowing how to be proactive than just reactive to what's taking place. This is especially important for the mentor. Not to say that the mentor doesn't get triggered sometimes as well, okay? But really, this patience, flexibility, discretion, and the action that you are taking as a mentor, just remember that we're always taking actions, but are you going to react or are you going to proact? That's important. So the next one, I think, and we've done a video on this one, the value of mentoring, and it sort of links to when you mentor, you mentor. If you're going to mentor and then coach, then you have to, or I would encourage, I think Doug would encourage, we both would encourage, declare, I am moving from mentoring to coaching, because it's an important distinction. When you coach, you coach. When you mentor, you mentor. When you train, you train. When you instruct, you instruct. These educating approaches. And while both mentoring and coaching are guide on the ride, educating tools and techniques, there is enough about them that you want to know which one applies when. And as a mentor, is to know that you're mentoring. And if you are going to use coaching, then know that you're switching over. And from a mentee point of view, make sure that you're clear. Do I need a mentor or do I need a coach? This is important. Sometimes mentees will walk in thinking, well, mentoring, coaching, they're all the same thing. I'll just get what I need and walk. And from a mentor point of view, make sure you're able to discern that in support of the mentee. A quick way of looking at it, in mentoring, the mentee is asking questions of the mentor, tapping into the lived experience of the mentor, and it's from a place of evolvement. Where from a coaching point of view, is the coach is asking questions of the coachee from an involvement point of view. Quick distinction, but there's more. We have a great video on that if you look into the YouTube channel about coaching and mentoring. And the other thing that I would just offer is that from a mentoring perspective, you're often figuring out what does this lead to. Same from a coaching point of view, but from a mentoring point of view, when the questions are being asked of you, what's this leading to? Where do you think the mentee is coming from? That's a question you want to be asking yourself. That's what you want to be reflecting in and on, so that you can be ready to provide the answer, right? And to really understand this essence of mentoring that you are doing. So be really clear about what's mentoring, what's coaching, and which one you're doing. And I'll declare, just as an example, is I'm not a great coach. And I share that with people based on the definition and say, if you want to interact with me, I'm great, extraordinary at mentoring. I'm good at coaching, but I can be of greater service if I'm in this role of mentoring. And I bring that to their attention because I want to be natural in my interaction with people. Any thoughts there, Doug?
The one thing that I was going to mention, or that I am going to mention, is we talk about the aspect of the mentee knowing whether they need a coach or a mentor, and the mentor knowing whether this is a place that they need to plug in. What's also part of that whole story, or that whole equation, is the organization needs to know or understand what do they actually need. Is it a coach that they need to deal with this situation, or is it actually a mentor? And I've had situations where I've been brought in when coaching had not worked well, and we probably could have saved some time had we have sort of made that declaration a little bit earlier.
So I think you and I have had discussions about this, dialogue about this. One of the things that we encourage in the mentoring for the workplace, mentoring with the workplace, conversations that we have is to get corporations to make that distinction between what's coaching and what's mentoring, because sometimes they're notorious for just mixing it all together and then saying, oh, this is what we need, without really doing the due diligence of unpacking those words. So great point. Thanks for reminding us. Number 5, the 5th one that we wanted to bring your attention to, I highlighted it a little bit, Doug highlighted it a little bit in the very beginning when we talked about the value that we derive from mentoring. And this is this notion of the personal well-being, well-living, well-being for self, well-living with others. And when you're mentoring is leaning into what's happening for the mentee. Is there a sense of well-being that is being fostered and fashioned and nurtured in the mentoring, or do I see something happening that might be taking people off on a tangent, or do I see something that might be influencing the mentoring conversation that may have to be dealt with earlier? So this notion of the self-concept, right, and being able to determine what stays and what goes, right? So this reflecting that's taking place, the edits that you as a mentor might make into your conversation, and edits from the place of add, alter, delete, all right? And I'm just going to ask Doug, because one of the areas that you do a lot of work in is around mental health, and to the point that I'm attempting to give here, is that sometimes you may have to deal with the mental health issue, right, before you can actually get into the mentoring from a work perspective. You want to just elaborate a little bit on that? And I know you get some great examples too.
Well, the big thing is that, number one, being able to recognize when there's something that is going on in the life of that mentee that has been missed in the past. So people have overlooked it or chosen not to even take a look at it. And then it's being able to sort of have that conversation or that dialogue up front to be able to say, I'm sensing that there may be some things that are going on in your life that could potentially cause us some obstacles or barriers that we will need to address before we can move forward with your professional development, so your career development and all those things. And it's being able to get the mentee to be able to take the step back and say, okay, I need to focus on my well-being, my mental well-being. I get that. I understand that now. So now what do we need to do to move forward? And what was interesting was I had a call yesterday or the day before, and we went right straight to the personal well-being of the mentee. And it wasn't me that drove the bus to take us there. It was, yeah, things are going fine work-wise. However, in my life, this is going on, and I'm dealing with this, and I'm dealing with that, and all those things. And so then it's a matter of, okay, let's take a time out and sort of ask ourselves the question is, how much of an impact are those mental health challenges that you're experiencing? How much of an impact is that going to create or already creating on your ability to move your business forward?
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And folks, connect with Doug. He's got a deep practice that connects into the mental health. He's got a book titled
You Are Not Alone.
And you've got another book coming out that sort of extends that first, that's the issue, is the second book. The first book was called?
The very, very first book was The Gift of Mentoring. The one that just was released in January is You Are Not Alone. And the next one that I'm writing is The Silent Pandemic.
Okay. So if from connecting mentoring, mental health, reach out to Doug. He's got a very deep practice in that area. But sort of leaning into what it is we're chatting here, just to finish off this notion of the personal well-being, well-living, I'm going to bring the word philosophy in here. philosophy in the sense that the love of your value. What is it that you value? That to study those values, that worth, that truth, that utility, because in knowing that, you are able to create what we would call a point of view. And as a mentor, it's important that you're willing to share your point of view with the mentee. Now, timing, you don't necessarily want to, first minute in, I want to tell you my point of view of mentoring, and this is what is, that has a little bit of a grindy flavor to it. But to know your point of view so that you can share it, so that the mentee, from their own personal well-being, can get to know you, to understand you being natural, being fully human, is to understand this philosophy, this point of view that you will share, so that you can learn. And in that point of view is also the sharing of the point that you know that you can learn from the mentee as well. So don't leave that out of your point of view. So this notion of the mentoring from a reflection point of view, the documentation point of view, these continue, all right, your edits of your point of view of the philosophy of mentoring that you're bringing in. And that, for me, that's exciting. I have a leaning into that, but I think then in our own ways, we may not use those words, but that's what our logbook, that's what our documentation, that's what our reflection is about. Anything you want to add there, Doug, before we start looking towards closing?
No, I think you've covered that off quite well.
Okay. So just to share with you is that what we did on today's broadcast is that we took a look at this notion of work, what is mentoring, what's experience, what's value, what's bringing it together from mentoring at work, the value of experience, or the value of experience while mentoring at work. It depends how you want to play with the title. So we looked at some of the definitions and key thoughts, and then we looked at 5 considerations about the value of experience, linking it to mentoring and thinking about mentoring as a form of work even, so that you have something here to look at. So we would encourage you can add comments in later. We'll respond to them, subscribe to the channel, and certainly join us again on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain, Weather Daylight Standard, because we play around with those still. So 10 a.m. and join us. So you'll find us on the Mental Health Community Mentoring Facebook channel, and also at the YouTube channel for the International Mentoring Community. A lot of those links are highlighted below in the show more notes on the YouTube channel. So look forward to seeing you. Again, reach out to Doug or myself if we can be of assistance. You can leave a comment here, or you can certainly leave a comment on our website, internationalmentoringcommunity.com. So, like I say to Doug, guess what, Doug? It's that time to give us a closing out thought. I bring us in, Doug takes us out. When I know Doug has completed his thoughts, then I'll just say take care and we'll end the broadcast. So Doug, over to you.
So I encourage our listeners today to think about the value of experience and the relatability of that experience to each and every time that they sit down and spend time with a mentee, and try to leverage experiences that you've got that are something that a mentee is going to be able to see as being relatable.
Great. Take care, everyone.